Keane Mulready-Woods was born in Drogheda, a small port town in County Louth, on the east coast of Ireland, 56 kilometres north of Dublin. He was born to a working-class family and attended St Oliver's Community College. He was a fan of motocross and owned his own scrambler motorbike. He was described by his cousin as the best scrambler rider in Drogheda. Even though Drogheda is a small town, it has been branded as the second most dangerous city to live in Europe due to its high crime rate, including drug dealing, home burglaries, and violent assaults being amongst the most common. By the time Keane was just 14 years old, he was tempted into petty crime by local criminals with promises of wealth and prestige. He first began as a drug runner, where local drug dealers would use him to deliver drugs to customers. His involvement with local gangs soon escalated, and the gang he was involved with began feuding with another gang, resulting in what became known as the Drogheda feud. The Drogheda feud is a series of allegedly connected crimes in the town. 4 people have been killed as a result of the feud, which began with 2 local gangs trying to control the illegal drug trade in the town. Further crime incidents that have happened as a result of the feud include beatings, stabbings, shootings, pipe bomb attacks, house arson, murders and attempted murders. The Garda, which is the Irish police force, have logged up to 100 incidents related to the feud. Keane was getting in way over his head with these criminals, and his involvement became bigger and bigger. By the time he was only 15, Keane had a reputation for terrorising and intimidating locals, and had been charged with making a threat to damage a house in the town. Soon enough, along with his gang, he began using petrol bombs and pipe bombs to threaten rival criminals and their families. These were also used as intimidation to enforce a collection of debts owed to them by drug customers. In a threatening warning that left the occupants in fear, Keane told them that he would burn them alive in their beds, and claimed that he didn't do it properly last time. The following year, Keane smashed the window of the home of the mother of a boy who owed a drug debt to him before throwing a petrol bomb inside. He also demanded money from an innocent woman, and despite handing over the cash to him, he stole her cat and killed it. Keane was fast becoming notorious around Drogheda for his participation in the feud. Tragically, at just 17 years old, he could not see the true danger that he was putting himself in, as he caught the attention of a rival gang. On the 12th of January 2020, Keane had been spotted on Dominic's Bridge in Drogheda town centre at around 6 p.m. At this time, he had been on bail and was subject to a curfew after being accused of pointing a gun at a shop manager, criminal damage, and threatening a family. Keane was also suspected of being involved in a petrol bomb attack on a car in a local council estate. He placed a call to his mum asking for her to leave money on the mantelpiece as he was going to get a taxi home. But Keane would never arrive. It was the next day when Keane was reported missing by his mother. His sister had even posted a message on Facebook the afternoon of the following day, asking if anyone had seen her brother. The Garda soon got to work trying to locate the missing teen, but they could never have imagined the horror that they were about to uncover. Just one day later, at 10 p.m, a sports hold-all bag was discovered laying on the Moteview estate in Coolock, North Dublin. Inside were a pair of dismembered arms and legs. Despite popular belief that these were the grisly remains of the missing teenager, it could not yet be proven, as the thumbs and fingertips had been removed from the hands. The bag also contained flip-flops, which were taken as a warning not to cross Robbie Lawler, a mobster and hitman whose flip-flops had been stolen in an earlier mugging. Lawler was well known to the Garda for being involved in serious and organised crime. He had over 100 convictions and had been released from prison in December of 2019. After leaving a gym that same month, he'd been mugged in an attack that was filmed by his assailants.
Get a video. Get a video of me staying here. Yes! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it! That's only the start of it, Robbie!
They also stole his gym bag and flip-flops, and posted photos of them wearing the latter after the mugging. The presence of the flip-flops in the bag of Keane's remains dumped in Coolock was widely interpreted as a threat not to cross Lawler. A major Garda alert was then put in place for Robbie Lawler, who was also the suspected hitman in at least 5 other gangland slayings. However, when found by the Garda, Lawler claimed to have been at home watching Love Island on the night that Keane was reportedly murdered. 2 days later, on January the 15th, a stolen car was found ablaze near Dublin's North Inner City on Trinity Terrace. Fire crews managed to extinguish the blaze before it destroyed the car. Inside was a head and a pair of feet. These were later confirmed to have belonged to Keane Mulready-Woods. The Garda soon began gathering information and intelligence on what had happened to Keane since he was last seen on the Sunday evening. They also made a number of appeals as part of their murder investigation at a press conference. It is understood that his fingers were cut off by suspected gang members to avoid detection through DNA under their victims' fingernails after he had put up a fight. Police believed that he had been abducted and taken to a nearby home, where he was tortured and murdered before his body was driven around 30 miles away and disposed of. The Garda believed that Keane may have been targeted in revenge for the gangland hit of Richie Carberry in November of 2019, who happened to be the brother-in-law of Robbie Lawler. 39-year-old Carberry was gunned down outside his home in Bettystown, County Meath. A mob boss who went by the name of Mr. Big and his mob emerged as the chief suspect for the murder. A source later confirmed that within days of Lawler's release from prison, he was already planning something big as revenge for Carberry's slaying. By January the 16th, the Garda made an appeal for the public's help in tracing a blue Volvo V40 that had been seen throwing the remains in the sports bag out of the car. The Garda said that the motor was stolen in Sandymount, Dublin on December the 15th and was bearing false registration plates. Meanwhile, they were also probing reports of online videos and images of the horrific torture and murder of Keane Mulready-Woods. The clips were sent to Keane's gang bosses to goad and intimidate them, whilst the Garda said that they caused huge distress to Keane's family. On Saturday the 25th of January 2020, a rally against drug-related violence took place in Drogheda and was attended by thousands. The Republican Party's Fianna Fáil vowed to bring Ireland's Garda force up by 16,000 members and introduce new gangland laws to tackle feuding drug cartels. By Wednesday the 29th of January, Keane's family were desperate to lay him to rest, but were reluctant as they still didn't have all of his remains. A new appeal for information was made by Superintendent Andrew Waters, who was investigating the case. He urged the killers to seriously examine their conscience and reveal where the rest of the remains were. February the 6th was the day that Keane would have turned 18 years old. His family posted many messages to social media to express their heartbreak. Unable to wait any longer, Keane's funeral took place just 6 days after this. Mourners gathered at the Holy Family Church in Ballsgrove to remember the tragic teenager. Some of his friends wore white t-shirts with his face on the front, as the white coffin with the picture of a motorbike on the side was carried into the church. On the 20th of February, 2 men were arrested as part of the Garda's investigation into the murder. These men were soon identified as 25-year-old Paul Crosby and 47-year-old Gerard Cruz. The arrests led to a search of a property in the Rathmullen Park area of Drogheda. It was determined that blood and DNA was found inside the home despite an attempted clean-up. The 2 men were charged with the teenager's murder and appeared before the Special Criminal Court. Crosby pled guilty to the charge. It was determined that Keane was lured to the house where he was murdered, and his body was then dismembered with hand and power tools. The court heard that Crosby had met Keane Mulready-Woods on the day he went missing, paid for his taxi fare, and lured him to a car where Cruz drove them to the rear of the property in Rathmullen Park, where he was then murdered. Listing evidence, Detective Inspector Aidan McCabe said that the two men had bought a van in which Keane's bone fragments were later found. Crews had provided bags which were later found at the murder scene, one of which contained a drill. He'd also bought false registration plates for a car later used to move the teen's remains to Dublin. Both men apologised for what happened, with Crews insisting that he didn't know that Keane was going to be murdered. There was no evidence that either men were present when the murder took place, but Crosby was in contact with Robbie Lawler by phone. The court was satisfied that Crosby was the more senior of the two, as he had received directions from Robbie Lawler and passed them on. Crosby was sentenced to 10.5 years in prison, whilst Crews was sentenced to 7.5 years, with the last 6 months suspended on both sentences. On the 4th of April 2020, Robbie Lawler, who was aged 36, had travelled to Belfast in the early morning hours, possibly to collect debts. The Garda had already warned him to stay away from the area, as his life could be in danger, but he ignored them. Robbie Lawler was shot dead at around 11:50 AM outside a house in Etna Drive in North Belfast.